Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. 2 years ago, I purchased what I consider my dream home. It's a beautiful craftsman-style house built in the 1930s, sitting on 3 acres of wooded land with a stunning view of the mountains and lake. The property has its own private road leading up to it, about a quarter-mile long, which I fully own according to my deed. This was actually one of the main selling points for me. My property borders a fancy gated community with an HOA that's known in the area for being particularly strict. When I was looking at houses, I specifically avoided anything with an HOA attached to it. I've heard too many horror stories, and after living in a condo with a nightmare association board for 5 years, I swore I'd never deal with another HOA again. During the purchase process, a representative from the neighboring HOA actually reached out to me through my realtor, suggesting I might want to join their association for added benefits like access to their clubhouse and pool. They also mentioned something about maintaining aesthetic continuity in the area. I politely declined. My property wasn't part of their development, had never been part of their association, and I had no interest in paying dues or following their rules. The previous owner had maintained the private road well enough, but I decided to have it repaved shortly after moving in. My home sits at a higher elevation than the HOA community, with the private road winding up the hillside. From certain spots on my property, you can actually look down and see parts of their development. I imagine some residents didn't appreciate that I could see into their backyards, though I had zero interest in spying on them. For the first few months, everything was peaceful. I settled in, did some renovations on the house, and enjoyed my privacy. Then the HOA hired a new security company. I first noticed something was off when I spotted an unfamiliar white SUV with community security written on the side slowly driving up my road. I thought they might be lost, so I didn't think much of it. But then it happened again the next day, and the day after that. About a week later, I had some friends over for dinner. When they arrived, they mentioned that a guard in a security vehicle had stopped them at the bottom of my road, asking where they were going and requesting ID. My friends, assuming this was normal for the area, complied, but found it odd. I was immediately annoyed, but figured it was a misunderstanding. The next morning, I drove down to the guardhouse at the entrance to the HOA community and explained that my road was private property and not under their jurisdiction. The guard on duty seemed understanding and apologized for the confusion. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. A few days later, I had arranged for a plumber to come fix an issue with my water heater. I was working from home when I received a call from the plumber saying he was being denied access to my road by security. I immediately got in my car and drove down to find a different guard blocking the entrance to my road, telling the plumber that unauthorized commercial vehicles weren't permitted in the community. "This isn't part of your community," I explained, trying to stay calm. "This is my private road leading to my private property. You have no authority here." The guard, a tall man with a crew cut who clearly enjoyed throwing his weight around, looked at me with complete disdain. "This entire area is under our protection," he said. "The Homeowners Association has contracted us to maintain security standards for all roads in this vicinity." I showed him my deed, which clearly stated my ownership of the road, but he barely glanced at it. "That doesn't change anything," he said. "We have authority to enforce community standards on all access roads." After arguing for nearly 15 minutes, he finally let the plumber through, but not before writing down his license plate number and company information. By this point, my water heater issue had gone from inconvenient to potentially damaging as water was beginning to seep into my utility room floor. That evening, I called the HOA management company and lodged a formal complaint. The woman I spoke with said she would look into it, but didn't seem particularly concerned. I followed up with an email detailing the incident and attaching a copy of my property deed. A week passed with no response. Meanwhile, the security patrols on my road increased. I regularly saw them driving up and down, sometimes stopping to take photos of my house and property. When I had packages delivered, the guards would often question the delivery drivers. One driver told me he'd been warned about unauthorized stops in the community. The situation escalated when I received what looked like an official citation tucked under my windshield wiper. It claimed I was in violation of community landscape standards and had 14 days to remedy the situation or face fines. The citation mentioned overgrown vegetation along the roadside and unapproved decorative elements, referring to some garden statues I'd placed near my driveway. I was furious. I called my attorney, who specialized in property law, and explained what was happening. She was equally outraged and suggested we send a formal cease and desist letter to both the HOA and the security company. While waiting for the legal process to begin, things got worse. The head of security, who I later found out was called the Chief by his staff, seemed to make it his personal mission to make my life difficult. One rainy evening, after a long day at work, I was driving home when I found two security vehicles blocking my road. The chief approached my car window. "We've received complaints about speeding on this road," he said, his tone condescending. "From now on, we'll be conducting regular traffic monitoring here." "This is ridiculous," I replied. "This is my private road. You have absolutely no authority here. Move your vehicles now." He smirked and said, "We're just doing our job. The HOA has authorized us to monitor all roads in the area for community safety. I don't care what the HOA told you. They don't own this road. I do. Move your vehicles or I'm calling the police." He laughed and said, "Go ahead. We work closely with local law enforcement. They understand what we're doing here." I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the security vehicles had moved. The officer took my report, but didn't seem particularly interested, suggesting it was a civil matter between me and the HOA. This pattern continued for weeks. Security vehicles patrolling my road, guards stopping my visitors, fake citations appearing on my property. I installed security cameras around my property and began documenting every incident. My attorney sent the cease and desist letters, which were ignored. Then I got lucky. A resident from the HOA community stopped by my house one day. He introduced himself as a retired attorney who served on the HOA board but was increasingly uncomfortable with the board's actions. He warned me that the HOA president and several board members were actually attempting to claim my road through adverse possession, essentially trying to take ownership by exerting control over it for an extended period. "They've convinced themselves that your road should be part of the community," he explained. "The president in particular is determined to bring your property under HOA control." He also revealed something I hadn't known. The HOA president had tried to buy my property before I did, planning to demolish the historic home and build a modern mansion. When his offer was rejected in favor of mine, he apparently took it personally. Armed with this information, I decided to take more aggressive action. My attorney and I developed a comprehensive strategy. First, we sent formal notices to both the HOA and security company, explicitly revoking any permission to enter my property and clearly defining the boundaries they were not to cross. These were sent via certified mail with signature confirmation. Next, we researched the security company and discovered they weren't properly licensed for some of the activities they were performing, particularly issuing citations and stopping vehicles on a private road. I continued gathering evidence, security camera footage, testimonials from friends and delivery drivers who had been harassed, and photographs of the fake citations and security vehicles on my property. My attorney also discovered that the chief had been fired from his previous security job for similar overreach issues, including impersonating law enforcement. We compiled all this information and scheduled a meeting with the county sheriff's department, bypassing the local police who hadn't been helpful. The sheriff's deputies were much more interested, particularly when we showed them evidence that the security guards were essentially impersonating authority figures and illegally restricting access to private property. One deputy suggested setting up a sting operation of sorts. The next time the guards blocked my road or issued a fake citation, I was to call them directly, and they would respond immediately to catch them in the act. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I was returning home from the grocery store when I found a security vehicle blocking my driveway. The chief approached my car and slapped a citation on my windshield for unapproved vehicle parking on my own property. "This is your final warning," he said smugly. "The HOA board has voted to begin assessing fines for continued violations. If you don't comply, we'll have no choice but to take further action." I calmly took out my phone, called the sheriff's deputy's direct number, and waited. The chief stood by my car, arms crossed, clearly believing nothing would come of my call. 15 minutes later, 2 sheriff's vehicles arrived. The deputies approached and asked what was happening. I explained that this man was trespassing on my private property, impersonating an authority figure and threatening me with fraudulent fines. The chief immediately changed his tone, claiming there was a misunderstanding and that he was just doing his job as instructed by the HOA. The deputies asked to see his security license and any documentation authorizing him to issue citations or restrict access to my road. Of course, he had none. When they asked him to provide contact information for the HOA board members who had supposedly authorized his actions, he became evasive. After reviewing the evidence I had gathered and confirming the boundaries of my property with county records they had brought with them, the deputies informed the chief that he was trespassing and had been engaged in harassment and impersonation of authority. To my immense satisfaction, they handcuffed him and placed him in the back of their cruiser. A second security guard who had been sitting in their vehicle was also detained. The look of shock on the chief's face as he realized the tables had turned was something I'll never forget. In the following days, 3 security guards were charged with trespassing, harassment, and impersonating authority figures. The security company's license was suspended pending investigation. My attorney filed a civil lawsuit against both the security company and the HOA for harassment, attempted property theft through adverse possession, and infliction of emotional distress. The local newspaper picked up the story, publishing an article about HOA overreach that featured my case prominently. Suddenly, other homeowners from the community began coming forward with their own stories of harassment and unreasonable enforcement by both the HOA board and the security company. The publicity caused many HOA residents to demand answers from their board. At an emergency meeting that my retired attorney friend later told me about, residents expressed outrage at how their dues had been spent on illegal harassment campaigns and potentially costly legal battles. The HOA president attempted to defend his actions, claiming he was trying to maintain community standards and protect property values, but the other residents weren't buying it. When it came out that he had a personal vendetta against me because of the failed attempt to purchase my property, several board members resigned in protest. My lawsuit was settled out of court. The terms included a substantial monetary payment covering all my legal fees plus damages, funding for an electronic gate at the entrance to my private road, a legally binding agreement acknowledging my property rights and explicitly prohibiting any HOA involvement with my property, the removal of the HOA president from the board. The security company was replaced with a more professional organization that received proper training on jurisdiction boundaries. The new guards now stop at the edge of my property and actually wave politely when they see me. As for the chief, he lost his security license and faced misdemeanor charges. I occasionally see him working at a local gas station. He always avoids eye contact. The most satisfying outcome was the reform of the HOA itself. The remaining board members, chastened by the experience and pressured by residents, rewrote many of their most restrictive rules and adopted a more collaborative approach with homeowners. My retired attorney neighbor was elected as the new HOA president, and he's instituted a much more reasonable regime. He sometimes stops by for coffee, and we laugh about how differently things turned out than the previous board had planned. I still live in my beautiful historic home, enjoying my view and my privacy. The new electronic gate ensures that only authorized vehicles can access my road. My property values have actually increased, partly due to the improvements I've made and partly due to the publicity from the case. Sometimes I sit on my deck in the evening looking out at the mountains and down at the HOA community below, and I can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I stood my ground against bullies who thought their made-up authority trumped actual property rights, and I won. The lesson I learned through all this: document everything, know your rights, be persistent, and don't be afraid to fight back when you're clearly in the right. And maybe most importantly, never underestimate the power of a well-placed security camera and a good attorney. The next one is a pro-revenge story. For context, years ago, I, 20 female, and the father of my first 2 children, 26 male, were going through a rough time in our relationship. He was working night shift as a janitor in a nursing home while I was going to college for nursing during the day. We had a 1-year-old, and I had just given birth to our son 3 months earlier. There was a woman that he worked with that I had gotten to know pretty well when I would bring him his lunches. We were friends, or so I thought. He was supposed to be waxing the floors at night when no one was up and about. Just so happened my cousin ran into him and her having drinks at a local bar on one of the nights that he was supposed to be working. Came massive fight, got off early, just friends, blah blah blah, won't happen again. About a month later comes the talk. We have been fighting too much, let's keep this amicable for the kids and stay friends. Mind you, the house was mine. I paid the bills with grants and scholarships I earned through school. The car he drove was mine too. I would be nice and allow him to stay till he got something figured out, still take my car to work. I still fed him all that good nonsense. Then he starts being loving and we continue a physical relationship. I happened to be feeding our son one morning while he still sleeps and his phone goes off. I know, don't look for it if you don't want to know, right? Turns out he's been carrying on a relationship with the other woman the whole time he's been with me. It would have been fine if that's what he wanted, if he wasn't doing the same with me at the same time. Petty revenge. I crawled back into bed with him, naked, and he snuggled up like he always does. I took pictures from his phone, nice and graphic ones. I sent them to her from his phone, along with a very nicely, in my opinion, worded message explaining everything that he had been up to and into. Then I got dressed to the wonderful pings from his phone and continued about my day packing his things. He woke a few hours later and went for his phone first thing. I happen to come into the room as he's trying to call her, and when he turns to look at me, I can see all the blood rush from his face. He can't even mount a defense as I tell him all about the conversation me and his new girlfriend have had, along with some photos. All his things are now out on the porch boxed up. I tell him he no longer lives in my house and to leave. He starts to blubber about where will he go. So I told him that he better call his girlfriend to come pick him up and live with her because he sure as hell isn't using my vehicle anymore, and that sounds like his problem, and I shut the door on him. I had been with this man-child for 6 years, given my body, heart, and sanity to this man. Hell, I was even willing to still let him live there, not paying bills, eat there, and drive my car for him to be sleeping with both of us at the same time. Was it petty? Hell yeah, but it was deserved. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A few years ago, I worked as a cashier at a fast food restaurant. I don't eat fast food, so I don't know how it is with other places, but with this establishment, nothing was free. You want sauce with your tacos? That's $0.5, please. Substitute your sour cream with guacamole? Sorry, you have to pay for that. You want ranch with your salad? That'll be extra. All of these prices were very prominently displayed on a giant menu in the middle of the lobby, by the way. Now, I was paid minimum wage. I, nor any of the other cashiers, could not give a damn about all that. It also made the prices ridiculous, as a lot of customers naturally wanted add-ons. So usually we wouldn't charge for most of those things, but we could only get away with that when our manager was not in the front, as she was the strict type. Yell at you in front of the customers for giving away a free sauce type. On a slow day, an older woman walked in and ordered a salad. By the time it got to the register, she'd loaded it with a bunch of extras. To be completely honest, there was no rhyme or reason to what I chose to charge people for. It really depended on my mood. Her salad was pretty accessorized, so I felt like I had to charge for something, but I was having a good day, so I just rang her up for the salad and extra guacamole, and that's all. It was something like $12.50. She immediately started to complain about the price. I explained to her that it was $11.50 for the salad and $1 for the guac. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't cost that much just for a salad. Even $11 is way too much. I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's the price that's on the menu. Why did you raise the price so high? A salad should not cost that much. I tried to explain that I was only a cashier and did not, in fact, control the menus, but she would have none of it and only grew increasingly rude. Then, she dropped the classic dreaded line. Can I speak to your manager? I hesitated, looked her in the eye, and said, You don't want to do that. No? Get your manager. Right now. So I went to the back and told my manager that there was a customer who wanted to speak with her. She came to the register with me, looked at the salad, looked at what I rang up, and immediately started going off about how I didn't add the salsa, the chips, the house dressing. I was used to this, so I just stood there and stared at the customer as my manager screamed at me. The customer stared back, dumbfounded, as my manager took over the register, corrected the order, and left without acknowledging her at all. The salad came out to be around $16.50. The woman paid and left without another word. The next one is an entitled people story. My daughters, 32 female, live-in boyfriend, 34 male, and the father of our grandchild, of whom we have custody, has a level of entitlement I frankly cannot understand. I'm just left with my mouth gaping open at his attitude. He moved to our state 5+ years ago, following our daughter after he was evicted from his family's homes for being a deadbeat. Both his mother and aunt have kicked him out and will not allow him to return. His mother kept his dog and kicked her son out. That's funny to me. Since his arrival, he's not held a regular job for more than a week. His most recent example was him working for a grocery store in the deli. He quit after a week when they passed him over for an assistant manager's spot. A week! He's started many jobs in the past 5 years and quits nearly immediately after they offend him in some way, which usually is a trumped-up reason based on some slight offense, mostly not treating him like the royalty he thinks he is. Another example, friend of a friend got him a job on a construction site. He just had to arrive with safety boots and he'd be guaranteed to have a job holding a sign that said slow stop on it. Just stand there and hold the sign. He missed the start date. However, he lucked out as the FOAF involved was sick that first day and they rescheduled a start for the following week. Boyfriend didn't show. No job for you. He's done some DoorDash and similar gig work, but will only do it if his girlfriend goes along so she can do the jump out and get drop the package part of the gig. He just wants to drive. This means that he is only willing to work when she isn't at work. This is now moot since their cars have been repossessed. Daughter later lost her $25 per hour full-time job, her fault, see below TLDR note, and is now cleaning houses/Airbnb/apps as gig work. She's their sole income source. At one point, he got into a state program that gave you a place to live, gave you drug/alcohol/employment counseling, meds, and worked to integrate you into society. He didn't last a week after he refused to participate in group counseling sessions, and of course, participation is a requirement for the program. There was a time where our daughter was in jail, rehab, where he didn't have a place to live and was living on the street. He'd rather do that than get a job. He also refused to stay in a shelter. It was beneath him. There's certainly a victim component here. Nothing is ever his fault, everything happens to him, and it's all terribly unfair. He has to be the center of attention. He left a play date with his kid after they weren't paying enough attention to him. There's an entire history here that rapidly gets into TLDR territory. Drugs, DV charges, child neglect, TPOs, etc. They're all relatively minor misdemeanor charges and issues, the kind of things the judge gives you probation for. He's also failing to participate in any of his probation requirements, therapy, drug testing, and is likely to be violated soon. Most of what seems to be missing is, to me, basic self-preservation. If I meet my probation requirements, I don't go to jail. If I work this week, I can buy food. He seems to lack any awareness of cause and effect. For the record, he spent about a week in jail after the DV thing and was calling his girlfriend multiple times per day to bail him out. He doesn't like jail, but won't do anything to avoid it. She did bail him out, and he missed his court date afterward. I just cannot understand that he doesn't seem to understand that if you work, then you can eat and sleep in a bed. His avoidance of employment and any form of responsibility is like some sort of compulsion or mental illness. There's nothing rational about it. It strains my liberal brain, the part that says, give people a hand up, not a handout. He only wants the handout. Any hand up is refused. The next one is an entitled parent story. I don't remember much about my childhood at the house, but one thing I do remember is being mocked and bullied by my parents. Every time I would cry, they would laugh at me and mock my crying. This specifically would happen during fights. I would never cry to them about something personal because they were the ones who made me cry. They would make me cry over small things too, like a stain on my clothes or me closing the door too hard. Not much else comes to mind except me crying. They still do these things to this day, and I'm now 21. I thought I would have gained a little respect as I got older, but I was wrong. One thing my dad likes to do is accuse me of not taking accountability if I tell him that one of his accusations is untrue. For example, there was a time when someone left a crack in a glass cup and he immediately assumed it was me. I told him it wasn't me, and he shamed me by saying I don't take accountability. He also told me that just because I don't pay for things around the house, which they told me I didn't have to, I don't care about the items they buy. This happens a lot, and to stay on his good side, I have to accept his assumptions even though they're not true. Either way, I get in trouble. My dad also has a limit on how often I can go out. If I go out one day, I can't go out again for the rest of the week. Sometimes I tell them I'm going to work, turn off my location, and go do something else instead. Now with my mom, she confuses me so much. One day I think she likes me, and the next, I think she doesn't. She pushes me away, then pulls me back in. One time we got into a huge fight about why I was upset on my birthday. This happened on my 18th birthday. The reason I was upset was because the first restaurant we went to had a long wait and my family told me to choose another place. All I said was, okay, let me think. And then my sister got mad at me for some reason. It made me feel a little emotional, so I started crying. My parents looked back and said, "Why are you crying? Ha ha, there's no reason to cry." I tried explaining why I was upset, but then they got mad at me. Me and my mom were cleaning and washing dishes later, and we touched on the topic of my 18th birthday. It turned into an argument, and I said something like, "That's stupid." Then my mom tried to hit me. She's a head shorter than me, so I was just trying to avoid getting hit in the face. One thing I would never do is put my hands on my mom. I tried leaving the house because the whole situation caught me by surprise. She had hit me before when I was younger, but I didn't know she would put her hands on me at this age. She tried blocking me from leaving and took my car keys, so I left on foot on a hot summer day, adrenaline pumping through my body. I didn't realize I had scratches on my arms from my mom trying to hit me and sores forming on my feet as I walked on hot concrete. My dad found me and picked me up, trying to calm me down, and my brother was there with him. When I got home, my mom was sitting there in tears and told my dad that I put my hands on her. She had no marks, but I did. I showed my dad my marks, and my mom said something that still breaks my heart. She did that to herself. You know how she is. She lies. My brother then said that he saw me put my hands on her, so I gave up after that and just kept quiet. My brother, for some reason, likes to see me get in trouble. I don't know why he lied that day, but he does that often, and I always forgive him even if I don't want to. My parents also love calling me crazy, always telling me that I need help. Sometimes I overthink what they say, and it starts affecting my mental health. I try to limit interactions with them because every time I see them, we can't go a minute without arguing or them giving me snarky remarks. I still love my parents dearly when they're not this way. I know I'm not perfect either, but I just can't take their behavior anymore. They are the only people who can make me cry. I'm doing my best to toughen up and not let the dumb things they say affect me, but it's hard. I think I'm too soft. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.